Cobra Beer.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. Firstly, an apology. I have not been posting up much content lately because I've been really busy. We're recording an album with a band and it's just taken up all my time. So I really don't get much time to get onto the old computer and edit all the videos that I have to do and whatnot. And just, I'm not moaning about this, but there is a lot of work that goes into these videos. I have to re-look at every one and I have to chop it up, edit it, compile all the thumbnails, do all the research into the beer, etc, etc. So it's not just a case of me getting a little camera and doing it all and then going straight up to YouTube. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So hence the reason there's not been much content. But don't worry, once this album's over, I will just start again doing the regular stuff. But this is one I wanted to do. Now, you probably, a couple of times on this channel, I've said that I only buy beer that I think I would like. Now, this beer, if you're a foreign subscriber, i.e. you're not from the United Kingdom, you've probably not come across it. Although you might, I'm being a bit presumptuous there. But this stuff over here in the United Kingdom, it's popular, but only for one reason. If you go to an Indian restaurant, you're bound to find a bottle of this. Well, it's a toss-up between two beers. It's either this or Kingfisher. Now, I've done a little bit of research on Cobra, and supposedly they've got 45%, a 45% share in the market. However, most of the Indians I've been to, yeah, that'd be Percy. Most of the Indians I've been to have had Cobra. His face when I said Cobra, he just looked straight up at me. Yeah, what are you doing? Come up here. All right, me old mucker. Where's it going? He was a naughty boy the other day. He got into the bin, didn't you? Yeah, it's no good hiding your face, mate. You was in the bin. And I think he ate an onion. Now, if you're a dog owner, all joking aside, do not give your dog onions. It is fucking poisonous and it will kill them. Same with garlic as well. If you know, some people are tempted to give dogs human food. It's not very good for them, believe me. And if you give them stuff like onions and garlic and whatnot, it can be really bad for them. He was ill for a couple of days. And he sat in the kitchen. And my missus had to clear it up and she was gagging. Apparently it was disgusting. I didn't see it, fortunately enough. But he had been farting the whole day before that. And honestly, it was absolutely disgusting. But there you go. That's the moral of the story. Don't give your dogs onions. Hey, Percy, you don't like onions, do you, mate? Even though you're a gutsy little git. He was in the bin and he got an onion. So that's what happened. Anyway, what were we saying? Yeah, Cobra. I'm going to have to put you down, Percy, because you're bloody heavy, mate. Even that clear out ain't made you any lighter. Yeah, so it's quite popular in Indian restaurants. And I don't think I've ever come across anybody who's bought this outside of an Indian restaurant. And, you know, you could probably argue with me and say, yeah, you regularly drink this and all that, and that's fine. But I don't know anyone that would go for this. But when you're in an Indian restaurant, it's the done thing. Now, let me get onto the history of it because it's a little bit complicated, but it's quite fascinating, right? This came about in 1989, or the idea was conceived in 1989 by an Indian fella by the name of Karan Bilimora. And he was a sort of an importer and exporter. And he came over to the United Kingdom. There was an Indian polo team who were doing a tour and he was part of that somehow. I don't know how. But he noticed that the polo sticks that they were using in the United Kingdom were inferior to the polo sticks that were made in India. Now, Argentina has got a very big heritage when it comes to polo for some reason, I don't know. But at the time, there was a big embargo on Argentinian goods because of the Falklands War. So he had the bright idea of thinking, well, why don't I bring over some polo sticks? And he did, and they were very successful. Harrods bought them up, Lily White's, all them big department stores for the posh boys. Polo isn't a game for a rough bloke like me. Anyway, then he got onto the fashion side of things, and he was making a few quid and all that, but he still had 20 grand student debt. And apparently he liked drinking in English pubs, but he said the beer was too fizzy and too bitter. And I'm assuming he was talking about lager. I don't know what Percy's doing under there. He's creating havoc. Oi, behave yourself. And he decided that he would like a beer to go with the food, because he reckoned, and I did find this as well with lagers and stuff when I was having an Indian. Indian's quite heavy. Indian food can be quite heavy. Rice, the potatoes, that kind of thing. All the naan breads, you know, full of like stodge, carbs, heavy carbs. And if you were drinking fizzy beer with it, by about halfway through the meal, you would be absolutely bloated. And he'd come up with a bright idea of having a beer as drinkable as lager, but with the smoothness of ale. So basically, he took the fizz out of the beer. And it proved really popular. And I can sort of see why, because, yeah, Indian food and beer do go together. However, you'll see a lot of these craft brewers suggesting food mixes, and I've mentioned it a few times on the channel. When you're eating Indian food, you really don't want really strong hoppy beer, especially not bitter beer, and not the sort of stuff they do in America with them big, juicy, bitter grapefruit type hops, because you just get flavours, bitter flavours from the spices in the food and the bitterness and that, and it really doesn't make for a nice, in my opinion anyway, it doesn't make for a nice experience. What you need is basically a palate cleanser, and I think that's what this is. Now, they got taken over. Don't get me wrong, Cobra were successful. And I mean really successful. They were selling in most of the Indian restaurants, and they became very popular. It was a bit of a novelty. When it first came out, it was actually called Panther. I don't know whether you remember it. I vaguely remember that, but I don't remember when the change came about. But it was very shortly after, but I do remember Panther beer, and it was an Indian beer. And the first beer they imported actually came from India, came from Bangalore. And it was I can't remember the name of the brewery there, but there was a brewery based in Bangalore, and they first imported it to the United Kingdom. Of course, that's expensive, so they decided to brew it over here. And the first one to brew it was Charles Wells, based up in Bedfordshire. Now, you know what happened to all that lot? They got taken over. Molson Coors. In 2009, despite their success, they went into administration, and they owed 75 million quid. And well, I say they went into administration, they almost went into administration by the skin of their teeth, because on the same day, Molson Coors bought a 51% stake in that brewery, and they rescued it basically, but now they brew it, and it's brewed up in the hellhole that is in Burton-on-Trent, that brew all them shitty macro beers that some of them I've reviewed on the channel, some I refuse, but if you see brewed in Burton-on-Trent on the side, it's a fair assumption that it's brewed in the same brewery that this lot is brewed in. Now, I'll get onto the ingredients in the next section, but again, this ties in with the macro brew thing. Looking at this on paper, if it wasn't for the Indian restaurant, I would never ever buy this beer. I wouldn't even review it. But I've had it on so many occasions and drank it in Indian restaurants that I felt I had to, because I know a lot of you out there, well, certainly a lot of you United Kingdom subscribers, do drink this if they go to an Indian restaurant. So, with that in mind, let's get on to the next section, and I'll go over the ingredients. Right, before we do, this is a 620ml bottle. Wow. Now that is more than a pint. I wonder why they did 620ml. I don't know whether that's got something to do with food. They give you a little bit extra because, you know, you're eating a meal. Not sure. But I think this is the size it comes in bottles. If they do it on tap as well, on draft in a lot of Indian restaurants too. And it's 4.5%, so not too hefty. I'd say that's just about right if you're going to have a meal. You don't want to go too mental on it. Right, now here's the alarm bells. Now you've heard the alarm bells before. Molson Coors, big alarm bell. But the bigger alarm bells is that this is brewed with rice and maize. Now, in my opinion, that's not a good ingredient for beer. Yes, certain brewers do use that over here, but you generally tend to find that the ingredients of rice and maize are used by countries who don't have an abundance of malt, i.e. the malt that we have over here. So they use other fermentables, and rice of course is fermentable, and maize is as well. Maize is used a lot by the South American breweries, or notably the Mexican breweries, but a lot of others as well. And rice of course is used by Asian and Oriental breweries. So yeah, I mean, I don't like it. I'm not knocking them, saying, oh, you should have malt in your beer, because they just don't have the land, the arable land, to just grow malt to brew in beer. So that's probably why they use rice. Rice is abundant in Asia, and maize, of course, is abundant in South America, so they use that instead. That's what they do. In my opinion, it makes an inferior beer, but there you go. No idea what the hops are on this. Oh, by the way, they do the non-alcoholic version of this for people who obviously don't drink alcohol, or they may be driving or whatever, so you can get this in 0% ABV. They also do one called King Cobra, which is a double fermented style Pilsner, bottle conditioned Pilsner as well. Never seen that, or have I? King Cobra. I probably have. It just hasn't registered with me. It's not, as a general rule, I don't drink this sort of beer on its own. And one of the reasons I'm going to be drinking it is to see what it tastes like without an Indian meal in front of me. So yeah, I'm not holding up much on this one, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. Let's get it open. Let's see what's going on. Now, as I said earlier, all the alarm bells are ringing with this. It's got the dodgy ingredients. It's brewed up in Burton-on-Trent. It's a macro brewed beer. It fucking stinks. That don't smell nice. That smells typically macro brewed. God, smell that from here. It might be sulphur, but it don't smell nice. On draft, I think this is 4.3%. In bottle, it's 4.5. I've had both in Indian restaurants. Christ, that does not smell good. Oh, it's fucking vile. Am I really drinking this when I go to an Indian? Jesus. Oh, that just smells absolutely disgusting. It's a mixture of sulphur. When I say sulphur, I mean the eggy, shitty sulphur smell. There's just nastiness. That's the only way I can describe it. It doesn't smell like beer. It smells like skunk. I know it's not skunked because it's in a brown bottle, but I don't know. I don't know how it was stored before it went in the bottle, but it just smells cheap. I don't know, it's like an astringency to it, like tannin or something like that. Oh, it doesn't smell good at all. I really am not looking forward to this. I think this could potentially be a sink job. And I will say in its defence, on draft you don't get that aroma, but I've drunk it out of bottles in Indian restaurants. Jesus Christ almighty. I suppose normally when you go, well, do I? Yeah, I'd say it's rare that I actually go out for an Indian with a missus. It's normally at the end of a night. We end up in a restaurant. And to be honest, I don't mind Indian food. It's not bad if it's done properly, but it ain't my favourite. My favourite style is Turkish. That is, Mediterranean. Even some of the Lebanese stuff as well. Like hummus, all the salad and all that. Barbecued meat that they do on the skewers and stuff, pita bread, I love all that. Yes, you might think it's boring, but Turkish food, if you really get into it, they have got some absolutely amazing food, and if it's cooked right, it's superb. Anyway, right, that aroma seems to have died down now. Let's get it down the hatch. Wish me luck. But it's sweet, very sweet. There's some kind of syrup in this, definitely. And it's definitely not got, I mean, you only have to look at that. You haven't got the big carbonation in there, which is what it's supposed to do. It is very sweet. But this goes back to my point, and I think this is why it goes so well with Indian food, is because you do have that sweetness in there, and that counteracts all the bitterness and all the sourness that you get from Indian food, from the spices and the strong flavours. It balances it all out. It is quite sweet. Very smooth. There's a lemony type, artificial lemon style flavour from it, but it still smells nasty. Oh, fucking hell. I suppose when you're in a restaurant, you got all the smells from the food going around, you don't smell this. But, and this is cold as well. That has come out of the fridge. Yeah, it's just a good palate cleanser. You wouldn't put it this way, you wouldn't buy it for its flavour, because it's just too sweet. There is a definite glucose in this. Let me tell you a little story about buying this. I went to a chemist for my missus the other day. She had to get some tablets, and the pharmacy around the corner from us, it's in an absolute fucking shit state. They rolled out this new computer system for them, and it's fucked them up completely. So you take a prescription in there, and you leave it in Monday, and you go in there, say Thursday or Friday, still not done. You got to wait for a week. Honestly, it's an absolute fucking shit show. But my missus really needed these pills. She had her gallbladder out recently, and she had to get some medication for it. And the pharmacy around the corner is fucking useless. So I got the prescription off them. And there's another pharmacy about 10 minutes drive from there. But I've never been there before. So I went in there. It was on a little parade of shops. There was a little Premier, and they had this pharmacy. You walked into the pharmacy, and it's like stepping back into 1980. It's an independent pharmacy, but it hasn't changed. But what really done it for me, I remember thinking, blimey, this looks a bit old. But at the back, they had a big sign for a little compartment for photography and films. Do you remember? Well, I don't know, some of you are not quite as old as me, but you used to get your films developed in the chemist. Why the fuck the chemist? I mean, you'd either send them off to get them in them envelopes that used to come through the door, or you go to the chemist with your 35mm film, give it to them, it'll be ready. They used to send them away to the same place. But for some reason, chemists, you could do that. But they used to sell films and stuff like that in a chemist. Yeah, really weird. I know if you're not from the UK, you might find that strange. But they still had all the old signs, and the place looked like it would. Honestly, it was like a time warp. But next to it was the Premier Inn, and I went Premier Supermarket, and I went in there just to see what beers they've got. And they had all the usual local Kent stuff, a lot of Shepherd Neame stuff, but they had Cobra on there, and I just thought, do you know what? I'm going to review that. And here I am reviewing it. Right, it's very good, I would say, for when you're eating an Indian. I think they've got that spot on with that sweetness. But at the end of the day, you wouldn't, well, I personally wouldn't buy this for any other reason than just eating with an Indian, because it's definitely got a lot of the glucose syrup in there. You can definitely get that straight away. The aroma really would put me off, and the taste, well, yeah, as I said, the sweetness. The mouthfeel isn't too bad. It's very smooth, and that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to be smooth so you don't get bloated when you're eating your meal. And it ain't the worst beer in the world, I will say that. I mean, I've had worse lagers from that. I've had worse from the same brewery. And I shouldn't like this because it's got everything I don't like. It's got maize, it's got rice, it's macro brewed in Burton-on-Trent. It's brewed by Molson Coors. It should be a down the sink job, but for some reason, it just has a strange allure to it, and I think it's because I've drank it before without really giving it a second thought. But now, now I know what it's like, it will probably put me off. But to be honest, and I have to say, hand on heart, and I do want to hit this home, on these reviews, I really do like to give you my honest opinion. If that was shit, and it tasted like dog shit, I would tell you. But that ain't the worst beer in the world. But only with an Indian meal. Because that sweetness is a bit too much for me. But with an Indian, you know, as I say, this balances out the flavours. And that's the only thing it's good for. I wouldn't buy it under any other circumstances. So there you go. So what is the verdict on Cobra? Well, I had tasted this before, and I'm not going to lie to you. This was a beer that I've been drinking since I would say the mid-90s. Always in an Indian restaurant. Never ever bought it. Don't know anybody else who would buy it for any other reason than for just drinking with an Indian. Now I've tasted it on its own and really analysed it, I see why. It's very sweet. It counteracts all them Indian flavours. And I have to say, it isn't the worst beer you could drink with an Indian. Now, don't get me wrong, if it was a choice between this or a German Reinheitsgebot lager brewed in Bavaria, there is going to be absolutely no fucking contest whatsoever. But if this is all they've got, well, actually, no, that's not true. You go to a lot of Indians now, and they do Foster's, and they do Budweiser and shit like that. Heineken, I have seen Heineken in quite a few of them as well. I'd rather drink this, to be honest. Yeah, it's still a macro brewed beer, but it's good for what it does, or for what it's designed to do, and that's to be eaten with a meal. But yeah, so I'd recommend this if you're going to get an Indian, but under no other circumstances and no other style of food either, just Indian, I would recommend this. So the mark, what mark would I give it? On its own, I'll probably give it. This is going to sound really weird, all right? Because yeah, if you think good beer is good beer, you're right. Good beer is good beer, but this ain't a great beer. But with an Indian meal, it's okay. So on its own, as a beer, I'm going to give it quite a low mark. I'd probably give it a 3 or 4. There's just a little bit too much of that glucose syrup in it, and it does taste macro brewed. However, with an Indian, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. Now, don't get me wrong, as I just mentioned, I would prefer to drink a really good German lager or something of that ilk. But if you can't get that, and the choices are this, Heineken, Foster's, and any other kind of fucking dog shit that I deem to serve in an Indian restaurant, I would go for this. Because it ain't bad with a meal. So you can take what you want from that. 3 out of 10, 6 out of 10. Would I recommend it? Only with food. Don't buy it on its own. There is much better out there. And remember, if you can hear Percy snoring under there, and remember, beer is working class champagne.